Welcome back. Well, once again, my hopes of getting out and shooting with you have been dashed by rain. I'm getting very tired of this rain that's been persistent day after day after day. And the one day that it's sunny out, I have an appointment elsewhere that I simply can't accommodate doing a video. So what do you do when you can't go out and shoot? Well, any reasonable shooter would talk about guns at least. It brings up a question that I've seen sometimes written up, is whether or not somebody should get a machine rest, in other words, such as a ransom rest, to test their ammo. Because, they're widely acclaimed. You see them often mentioned in writers' articles about handgun accuracy when they're testing a particular handgun. And very frequently they're seen on YouTube videos, when, somebody is showing the accuracy potential of a particular handgun. So it really makes a lot of people wonder if they should go out and buy one of those. They're not cheap. I mean, ransom rest, you can look up the prices yourself. They're not cheap, and there's various options for mounting. There's a optional mounting system that adds to the price. It's adjustable. Each of the handguns for which it's used has to have its own particular adapter. So there's an expense involved. A lot of shooting clubs, that are devoted to handguns, sometimes the club will purchase one, and they'll purchase a bunch of common adapters for different people's guns. And the members of the club are welcome to use it to test particular ammo. But is it a viable consideration for somebody to simply go out and buy one for themselves? Well, I'm going to bring you back down memory lane a little bit, and I'm going to demonstrate a particular pistol rest that I'll show you right here. Now, if you were around during the 70s, perhaps the late 60s, you may have seen one of these. This is called a Lee pistol machine rest. It was made by then Lee Custom Engineering Incorporated in Hartford, Wisconsin. That company was dissolved. I believe it's the same family that produces Lee hand loading equipment these days. But this particular rest was quite popular among people who couldn't afford to buy a ransom rest, and it actually works very well. This one here I acquired a few years ago, but my first association with this particular rest was with the police department when I was testing ammo. We had just acquired a Star Universal reloading press, and we wanted to be sure that the ammo that we were going to be loading for the department was accurate. So anyway, we had already done some testing based on research. We did some testing with 2.7 grains of bullseye, 2.8 grains, 2.9 grains, and 3 grains, and so forth. And we discovered that, lo and behold, 2.7 grains, which was frequently listed as a accurate load for 147 grain wad cutters, was indeed accurate. So were the others. The others were pretty accurate as well, but the 2.7 grains of bullseye worked very well. Now you got to understand, back in the early 70s, bullseye was just about it when it came to fast-burning pistol powders. There weren't too many options in those days. We didn't have the array of pistol powders and reloading powders that we have now on the market. So that's what we decided to do. We ordered the drop cavity for a 2.7 grains of bullseye, and then I got the bright idea of getting one of these rests so that we could test our ammo and make sure that it was accurate. Now, we had already done our own testing across sandbags, and we made every determination which ammo was suitable. But in came this, through the mail, and we strapped it up with our Model 10 Smith & Wesson 38s, and we replicated the testing. And testing went very, very well. we discovered that 2.7 grains of bullseye was the most accurate load. my captain said, you needed to have one of these to find out what you already knew? And I said, well, you know, I guess I was a little bit embarrassed because the thing cost us, I think it was about $35 at the time, which was a lot of money. I mean, you know, we're talking in the early 70s. But how this works is quite simple. It's simplicity itself. As a matter of fact, in some ways, it has much to be recommended. It's based on the principle of uniformity, always returning the gun to exactly the same position, and when it fires, it always fires from exactly the same position. It's indexed against this rod right here, this roll tube. It's indexed here on this point, and it's indexed back here on these two trunnions. So, and each one of these are adjustable. This one here is adjustable for elevation. This one is adjustable for windage. It's a stress-free sort of arrangement. Unlike the Ransom rest, which has to be solidly bolted down, this one can be passively screwed to the bench. In fact, it worked very, very well with our department setup because we could simply lay this down on top of our fold-down benches at the range and clamp it down with a couple of C-clamps, and everything was more than tight enough. It doesn't react to vibration. When it fires, the gun simply comes back in your hand and removes itself from the rest. So the rest doesn't undergo any stress whatsoever. Everything just simply comes away just as you see it. I could literally do ammo testing just like this without even screwing it down, as long as I didn't bang into that rest. That's how easily this works. Works like a charm. As you can see, I've got a 45 ACP adapter in here. I've got quite a few different. I've got a 22 high standard. This was used when I purchased it, so I got what the previous owner had for grips. Has a Colt adapter. It's got a Smith & Wesson adapter. It looks like it's a K-frame adapter. And we've got here a 22 Colt Auto. That would be like for a woodsman or something like that. And here is a 9mm Browning high power. And this is perhaps a gun that's not known to people these days. There's a very popular Smith & Wesson back in the day. This is a Model 39 Smith & Wesson 9mm. So anyway, you can tell just by the dating of these handguns. You don't see too many Colt Woodsmans around anymore. You don't see too many high standards around anymore. So that's about it kind of dates the period that this individual was using this rest. Well, it works great. But as I say, I was a little bit embarrassed to find out that it simply gave me the same information that I had known before. Was it more accurate than simply testing over sandbags? Actually, to be honest with you, it was somewhat more accurate, a little bit more accurate. But it demonstrated the same thing. On a relative basis, the 2.7 grains of bullseye was more accurate, just as I had found over the sandbags. Whatever difference there was simply in my own, simply my own handling of the gun, my own personal physical input. So in the end, we purchased that, and it's set up on a shelf for years. And last I know, when I retired, it was still sitting up there collecting dust. It was something that we seemed to think that we had to have in order to assure that we had accurate ammo, but it really didn't solve any issues. It didn't answer any questions or anything else. It simply were answered by our own previous testing over sandbags. Which brings us to the big point, is there any usefulness for individuals to have one? If I were a gun writer, and if I were writing for the NRA or anything like that, or writing for a magazine, I would certainly want one, because I would want to be able to show what the relative accuracy of various guns is and different ammo is, commercial ammo or what other ammo I use. I'd like to be able to demonstrate that without saying that it's my particular input, my own personal shooting skill that has anything to do with it. It removes that human error. And so there's much to be said for it on that account. And I would have great usefulness for it time after time after time, because I'd be testing various handguns, and I'd have a continuing use for it. As an individual, however, as an individual who has a limited number of handguns, you know, I can develop loads over a sandbag, knowing that I'm not trying to prove to somebody else what my own personal limitations are. I'm not trying to remove my own personal human error. It's rather insignificant. I know what my own error is, and it's consistent no matter what ammo I use. And so if I'm testing a lot of, say, 8 different loads for a handgun, the same error is induced with each one of those loads. So relatively speaking, whatever load is the most accurate is the most accurate irregardless. And if I were to get a machine rest, whether it's something like this or a ransom rest, and test it, I'm going to have the same results that I had years ago with our 38s. I'm going to find out that yes, indeed, it's the more accurate or the most accurate load that I've tested. I'm not going to prove anything, and after a while what I'm going to do is I'm going to be kind of bored and tired with the idea that I have to, you know, fit the grip. This has to be secured. I have to take a grip panel off. I have to screw it in and secure it with a set screw that's inside and everything. There's some work involved. I've got to bring that whole thing to the range with a box and all the stuff that goes with it. And in the end, I could have simply had a sandbag and put my handgun on it, and I could accomplish the same thing to find out which ammo was the most accurate for me. I'm not trying to determine, personally, I'm not trying to determine what the ultimate accuracy of that handgun is. I'm simply trying to find out what the best load is for it. So it's an entirely different way of looking at it. And sure, if you have a club and somebody and the club has one of those devices on hand and is set up so that you can simply use it and to try it out with your ammo, that's a good option and everything. And there's a community that is purchasing it. You know, you've got a club that's purchasing it, and the cost factor is dispersed throughout the membership. But having one personally can really, you know, I purchased this Lee rest, about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. I used it a couple of times. I used it with that 45. I've used it with my Ruger, 22 pistol, my Mark II, and it does exactly the same thing that I would have discovered off the sandbags. It proves really nothing more than what I've already known. So it sits in the yellow box that I have for it, and perhaps I'll put it up for sale one of these days for somebody who might have a desire to own such a thing. And you know, of course, you can have any machinist can manufacture these various adapters out of aluminum bar stock. They're nothing special. So it has a particular use, but for me, it gets very boring very quickly. You got to bring it to the range. You got to set it up, clamp it down. You fire a few shots, and you say, "Oh yeah, that load works just the same way as it worked when I was shooting it over sandbags. It works." So it's a dust collector for most people. Now, there's one other matter that I want to address regarding the viability of a machine rest. When you're using it to test a revolver, you've got a solid, fixed sighting platform that's mounted directly to the firing platform. There's no interplay whatsoever between the sights and the barrel. Whatever you get for a sight picture is going to be influencing the barrel exactly the same each time. That's not necessarily true with an auto-loading pistol. The relationship of these sights right here is not necessarily going to be consistent each time with regard to the mounted grip frame. The grip frame is solidly mounted each time for uniformity upon its base, but what's the relationship between the grip frame, how solid is that between here and where the bullet emits? There could be a serious difference between that relationship. Now, much has been made through the years about the relationship of the slide to the grip frame. I'm going to tell you right now that that is something which is way overhyped. The relationship of the slide to the grip frame is that's not the important consideration when it comes to the accuracy of a handgun like this. The relationship of the sights to the bullet, the sights to the barrel, that's the important consideration. How the grip frame is mounted to the slide, whether it's loose or not, has much less to do with the fact that the sights have to be aligned to the barrel. And that can be accomplished, you know, the military found out years and years ago that they could take some old handguns that had very sloppy slides and make them very accurate, quite accurate, by simply installing a very tight barrel with a tight bushing. And that really tightened up groups. And that was the key behind making the initial, you know, national match 45s, you know, the Gold Cup 45s, was to tighten up the relationship of the barrel and the bushing and the slide. They wanted to have a slide that still operated freely, which required a little bit of a slight amount of movement. Not sloppy, I'm not talking about sloppy, but reliable movement, so that the slide would always cycle without any hindrance, especially when the gun got dirty through the day. This Ruger here, I can't move it. This is a very tight gun. But in my experience, I've fired some old 45s that had quite loose relationships, but they had been refitted with new barrels and new bushings, and they were quite accurate despite the fact that the slide to the grip frame relationship was loose. So I digress, but what it brings it back to is that if you're testing handgun ammo through a semi-auto like this, you may very well find that you can be more accurate over sandbags than with the machine rest, because if you're shooting a gun which is slightly sloppy where the grip frame and the slide are loose, if you're sighting over sandbags, every time you sight, you are aligning that relationship of the sights to the target and realigning your sight picture, and your bullet follows. If it's a fairly tight relationship to the slide, that's where the bullet's going to go. On a machine rest, however, there is no such assurance that your sights are aligned each time. Your grip frame is aligned each time, but if the slide has canted or moved or slipped sideways or whatever, you're going to have a variation in accuracy. Now, it's not going to be a substantial difference in accuracy, but it's going to be there. But that's what you're going to have with a semi-auto. So understand that it doesn't solve a machine rest does not solve all issues with accuracy testing. Is that right? Well, we're just about done. Yeah, he's a funny guy. Anyway, I want to thank all my Patreon donors for your help, for your assistance, and he wants to go do something. He gets bored, and I don't blame him. But I thank all my Patreon donors. You've been a great help to me, and I keep promising. I feel so bad. I wake up and I look outside and it's drizzling and it's just lousy rain. I hope this weather pattern just goes away. It heads off, you know, someplace else, because I'm getting very tired of it. And you know, summer is getting wasted. I mean, we're already well into June. So anyway, but I wanted to thank you for your subscriptions, and if you have not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button right now and give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up. And to everybody, thank you and God bless.